So the Christopher Ward The 12 has been released, and there's been a whole bunch of conversation about it. Is it any good? How does it wear? Is the design a copy of the Caseback Antarctique? I've got answers to all those questions and more. Stay until the end, because the last one will answer the biggest question about the 12. If you've been put off by the automatic Tissot PRX's size at 40mm, perhaps you would have been dismayed to see that the 12 also comes in at 40mm. Yes, the Bracelet has more flex in the first link than the PRX's. The PRX's first link is basically rigid against the case, but if your wrists come down all the way to 6 inches, like my wife's, you might still be feeling short-changed. Well, the good news is that on the rubber strap, the 12 fits absolutely fine on a 6-inch wrist. The broad dial and skinny bezel meet the case edge exactly, and the overhang of the central lug is incredibly short and steep. That means the flexibility in the quick-release rubber strap can return it tightly around the wrist, preventing the weird overhang gaps you get on the PRX. The sub-centimeter thickness also helps keep it snug. And if that's still not enough for you, there's a smaller 12 in the pipeline too. You may think the 12 is Christopher Ward's first attempt at an integrated sports watch, but that's very much not the case. Over a decade before the release of the 12, the brand released its first, the Quartz C2 and Automatic C20. Both were christened Lido, which is Italian for beach. Both watches featured a day-date complication and came on either a leather strap or integrated bracelet, and was heavily compared to the IWC Ingenieur Automatic available at the time. The bezel of both the C2 and C20 even had lightly bored holes, a nod to the Ingenieur's tool recesses. The 12 is available on a bracelet as well as the rubber, as any self-respecting integrated sports watch should be, as per the template set by the Royal Oak back in 1972. What's not so well known, however, is that the Royal Oak's bracelet was one of the biggest challenges of making it. With the tapered links and parallel connecting pieces, plus the high finish, it presented a much higher workload than a typical bracelet. For the 12, there has to be a compromise to avoid spiraling costs. Either the links could be multi-piece like the Royal Oaks, or they could be well finished. A poor finish wasn't really an option, and so the designers at Christopher Ward decided to propose a one-piece link with a brushed surface and polished edge, and scale it along the taper. This reduced tooling costs significantly, allowing the budget to accommodate the dual finish. There are many watches to which the 12 owes a nod, chief of which is of course the Royal Oak. The Royal Oak may not have been the first integrated watch design, but it was the one that really kicked the trend off in a big way. Designed by Gerald Genter, it became the benchmark for every other watchmaker, both back in 1972 and again in recent years as the craze resurfaced. The design nod to the Royal Oak you might have missed in the 12 is actually on the caseback. There are 6 screws holding it down, just like you'd see on a Royal Oak. There's also 2 screws in the crown guard as an Easter egg. But those 6 caseback screws aren't just nods to the Royal Oak. You would have also seen them in the C2 and C20 mentioned earlier. You might be wondering what the 12 brings over something much cheaper like the Tissot PRX, and really the singular answer to that is quality. The PRX is a well-made watch, but Christopher Ward has made a concerted effort, not just in the 12, to provide a level of finishing that you wouldn't ordinarily see at the sub-$1,000 price point where the 12 starts. A great example of this is the bezel. Made up of 12 sides with a bevel to make the inner bezel circular, it borrows heavily from the Zenith Defy Skyline in its execution. Except it's actually a little more complicated than the Zenith's. The 12's bezel sits on a secondary round step, with the inner corner bead blasted, the beveling top and bottom polished, and the outermost edges brushed. It's mirrored almost identically by the caseback, and is of course far cheaper than the Zenith's near $9,000 price. If you want to help support the channel, you can do so by checking out one of my books on Amazon. Search Andrew Morgan or check out the links in the description. Thanks very much. One of the musts when it comes to a Royal Oak-esque piece is a dial texture of some description. The Royal Oak has its engine turned to pissery pattern, the Zenith Defy skyline, the star logo pattern, the IWC Ingenieur an almost stars and stripes motif, and the 12 gets something too. Here it's the brand's updated Swish logo, the combination of the English and Swiss flags, and with a detail you probably missed. Each logo isn't just raised in relief, it's also a pyramid, repeating over and over across the dial. That's not the only clever thing about it. Most textured dials, the Royal Oaks included, will carve out a flat platform for printed or applied text to sit on. Not the 12. The lettering is stamped exactly where it needs to be, and no further. A surprisingly common letdown on luxury watches is the date. Not just its presence and location, but its execution. You would think it would be easy to make a date window blend into a dial by matching the colour, but apparently not. Many watches with dark dial colours are blighted by a bright white date wheel, not the 12. No matter which colour you get, you not only get a date wheel inverted to blend it in, it matches the colour perfectly. So whether it's grey, blue or even purple, the date window is a Pantone perfect match. Unlike many other watchmakers, Christopher Ward is very familiar with working with titanium. It's a more difficult material to machine and finish than steel, but with the right know-how and equipment, is not much more of a challenge. So it's not necessarily a surprise to see the 12 available in this lightweight metal. What is a surprise is that the titanium variant is 1mm thinner than the steel at 8.95mm, thanks to the higher grade Sellita SW300 inside. This has chronometer performance and a longer power reserve than the Steel 12's SW200. Christopher Ward has also chosen to make the titanium 12 from grade 2 instead of grade 5, which many watch manufacturers use. Grade 2 is basically pure titanium, whilst grade 5 is an alloy, which makes the grade 2 not as strong. It is, however, lighter, easier to form, and importantly for the 12's 100-meter water resistance, much more corrosion resistant. You might wonder how long a watch like this takes to make from conception to completion. The 12, as it happens, took 6 years, starting in 2017. That sounds like a long time, and that's because it is. At least it is for Christopher Ward. Many modern brands will take around 5 years to develop a product, but being smaller and more agile, using modern prototyping and development methods, Christopher Ward can usually do it quicker. So why so long for the 12? Well, basically because they had the idea, but they didn't know how to make it for the price. It's a complex watch to manufacture, and 6 years ago the brand didn't have the knowledge or the right suppliers to make it happen. Since then, watches like the Bel Canto have unearthed methods that have made the 12 possible. You and many others have noticed that the 12 has an uncanny resemblance to a few other watches. That's par for the course when it comes to the integrated style, but one watch in particular has been mentioned more than any other, the Caseback Antarctique. These two watches share a very dial-heavy design, shrinking the bezel down and expanding the dial almost to the outer edges. They both have similar hands and markers, and a dial texture at a similar scale. Even the crown guards have a very familiar essence. While the design of the 12 is credited to Will Brackfield, if we take a look at the team behind the Antarctique, you'll notice in amongst people like Emmanuel Boucher and Daniel Martinez, another name, Adrian Buchmann. If that name is familiar to you, it's because Adrian is also the head of design at Christopher Ward. The Antarctique came out in 2020, a few years after Christopher Ward started work on the 12. So you could say the similarity between the two watches goes more than skin deep. The two are related by blood, separated at birth, one to live a life of utter luxury, and the other to find itself in amongst the likes of you and me. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think of the 12 down in the comments below. Please also like and subscribe, and I'll see you over on the Watchfinder channel. Bye.